So it's time for the Stampers First Aid Challenge. The customers had the opportunity to submit a card that they felt like just needed a little more something, but they weren't quite sure what it needed. And each of the design team girls were asked to choose one of those cards and sort of give it a little bit of a makeover and explain why we chose to do the things that we did with that particular card. So I've chosen to work with a card that Jamie Green submitted. Jamie had some really great elements to her card that I really liked, and I wanted to keep the overall feel of her original concept, but just sort of tweak it a little bit with my own sort of twist on it. So let's get started. I've got a rustic cream card base here that I have cut and scored to be a standard A2 size card, and then I've taken a piece of Aqua Mist cardstock, and Jamie had used the largest angled labels die to cut out, essentially to cut out the center of this panel, and she made a frame with it. In this case, because the card is rectangle and the frame around the outside here on this panel is rectangle, and then to put a rectangle in the middle, there's just a lot of really straight lines. So to break up all of that boxiness a little bit, I've chosen to swap that out and use the Matte Stack 4 die instead to create my frame. I love where she was going with that idea, but I just decided to soften up the edges a little bit and put some curves into the card. So I'm going to die cut this, and I will be right back with you. So now that my frame is die cut, I'm going to set this aside, and now I've got this cool frame to use on the card. Before I go any further, I do want to interject that Jamie had chosen some darker kind of blues for the colors on her card, and it was a birthday card that she created, and so obviously she was going for kind of a soft, serene sort of feel by using those blues. So I've decided to just brighten it up a little bit. Since it is a birthday card, I wanted to create something kind of fun and fresh. So I've still kept the same sort of blue theme, but I'm going to be working with Aqua Mist, Hawaiian Shores, and some Spring Moss ink. So now that I've got the frame die cut, to add another little bit of interest to this part of the card, I'm going to use the cane print impression plate. I'm going to flip this over like so and run this through my Vagabond, and that way I'll get a really cool impressed pattern onto this frame layer. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're back, and I have got a really pretty pattern impressed right onto the frame. The impression plates, that's a great way to add some added detail and interest to your project without making the project seem too busy. If I had stamped that same type of pattern on the frame, it would have been really busy. That's why I love the impression plates. When you need just a little extra something, they are a great way to add some detail without it being too much or being over the top. And you certainly don't want to detract from the sentiment or the focal point that you're trying to create, but that just gives you an extra little bit of detail that makes it nice and pretty. So I'm going to use some foam adhesive to adhere the frame to the card front. I think we'll use some smaller ones here too. You may be thinking, that is a lot of foam adhesive, but the last thing you want when this card gets to the recipient is for part of the frame to be totally sagging or deflated. You want it to all stay relatively level. I mean, that's the whole point of using the foam adhesive in the first place, is to give it some dimension. So I like to use plenty of it to make sure that, you know, if I send it through the mail or whatever, it doesn't end up completely flattened out. So we're going to adhere this to the card front, just like so. And now I want to stamp the sentiments. I am choosing a sentiment from the Tag Sentiment stamp set. She had a really pretty sentiment. The sentiment, obviously you can go with whatever suits your needs for whatever type of card you're making. The reason that I'm choosing this particular sentiment is, again, it's got a, you'll be able to see it better when I stamp it, but the top part of the sentiment is rounded. So again, it helps to break up some of the boxiness by giving us a little bit of a round detail up at the top. But before I stamp the sentiment, I'm also going to add a really pretty flourish underneath it. This is from the Matte Stack 2 collection. Oops. I'm going to stamp this part in Aqua Mist ink. As you can see, this stamp is kind of stained because it's gotten lots of love over the years. Some ink on my block there. I want to make sure that doesn't get on my frame. I've just got a baby wipe here. I'm going to wipe that off real quick. And now I'm going to stamp the sentiment. I'm going to stamp the sentiment in Hawaiian Shores ink. When you've got your color combo selected, you want to think about which colors are going to make the best impact for what purpose you're using them for. In this case, sentiment, I really want that to pop. So I'm using the darkest color that I'm working with for the sentiment. So now that that is stamped, we will move on to our flowers. Jamie had used the Rosy Posy stamp set, and if you know anything about me at all, you know that Rosy Posy is a favorite of mine. You can't go wrong. It's very hard to make an unattractive card with Rosy Posy, as you will see with most of the entries in any of the Makeup Monday contests and anything like that. Anybody that uses Rosy Posy generally makes a really cute card, and Jamie's card was no exception. I really loved the way she was positioning the flowers off to the side of her sentiment in the framed portion. So I've gone ahead and used the Rosy Posy dies to die cut 3 flowers and 3 leaves. I generally, really almost all the time, I position, anytime I'm adding embellishments or anything like flowers, I try to add them in odd numbers, like 3s. I don't know why that is. It just tends to balance things out really well if there are 3. So I've got 3 flowers, and I've also got 3 leaves, and I'm sort of going to position them very similarly to the way Jamie had hers. I just happen to have more of mine because I think it will provide a little bit better balance. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp these. Again, regarding the color choices, when you're choosing which colors to stamp things like your flowers in, I've got a lot of Aqua Mist going on here, so I want to be sure and get a really big pop of Hawaiian Shores. So the Hawaiian Shores is what I'm going to use on the biggest flower, and also the small one that is the same shape of flower. That way we get a lot of Hawaiian Shores ink on the card. We're just, again, trying to balance out the colors and make sure that everything gets a good showing. I will do the smaller flower just like the big one. And now for the other small flower, I'm going to swap out and use Aqua Mist. That way everything is balanced. And now we'll stamp the leaves. I've got some spring moss ink. And I've got 2 small ones and 1 big one, essentially just like I did with the flowers. If I did all large leaves, it wouldn't balance out very well with the smaller flowers. If I did all small leaves, it wouldn't balance out very well with that jumbo flower, so we do a mix, and then we get a really pretty balance. And that's it for the stamping. All that's left to do is to pop these onto the front of the card. One thing I really like to do when I'm adhering leaves is to just put a little score tape on the back side of the leaf. Because when I stick that on the card, score tape is super strong, so it's going to hold that really well, and I can bend those leaves forward and not worry about them popping off at some point down the road. For the flowers, I'm going to do foam adhesive on a couple and just regular adhesive on one. Again, I don't want them all to be popped up, but I don't want them all to be flat either. I want to mix it up so that there's some depth to the card. So now we just sort of position everything where we think we want it to go. You'll notice I'm not sticking anything down yet because I want the flexibility to rearrange and move things around as needed. You just want to play with it. I'm trying to get kind of a nice little curve here without it being too obvious. So I think I'm pleased with all of that. So we'll sort of mush everything down, and then I can bend these leaves forward just a bit, just for one last finishing touch. And there we have it. My contribution to the Stamper's First Aid Challenge. For all the info about this and all of the other challenges for Stamp-a-Faire today, be sure to head over to Nicole Hetty's blog. We'd love to have you play along. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you've been having a great Stamp-a-Faire day. This has been Dawn McVey for Paper Tray Ink.